good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, good night, wherever you are calling in from the world tonight. It's Simon Yates, and thank you for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker once again. It's September the 3rd, and can you believe this? It's September. We're already most of the way through 2021, and we've got an awful lot of news to cover today with our live panel. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the news that we're going to be covering. We've got the BCN Ranking. This is a Japanese ranking system showing how well Japanese camera companies or camera companies in general are performing. We also have news on two new RF lenses that are coming out very shortly. This one I'm personally excited about, the RF 16mm, and of course the 100 to 400mm. And then we're going to talk about the Red V-Raptor ST 8K camera, the Gpixel 2000 frames per second, that's not a typo guys, 2000 frames per second sensor, a DJI announcement that's scheduled for next week, two new Fuji cameras, a Sigma announcement, and something else coming up very shortly. So it's going to be a very, very interesting night, but what I want to do now is introduce you to our live panel. I just want to check and make sure my lighting looks good, so I do look good. Can't do anything with this visage, you know, you get what you get. So let's go ahead and introduce our panel. And that's the wrong button. No, that's the right button. So here I am in the top corner, and I'd like to welcome back once again James from James Jackson Films. James, how are you this evening?
Doing great, man. I'm back. Glad. I think your thing can't talk is contagious, man. But no, I'm glad to be back, man. I'm really excited to get in. There's one particular thing I'm really excited to talk about. So let's get into this. Thank you, everybody, for joining the channel.
Yeah, and thank you very much for joining. I don't know what is, not that I'm tongue-tied. I got everything set up about a half an hour beforehand, but I was in what you would call super slow mode. And then all of a sudden we had 4 minutes left and I hadn't even turned on my back light. So that's what happens when you're a little bit too relaxed. Now, James, you also have a YouTube channel, is that correct?
Yes, I do. It's as my title, James Jackson Films, where I go over a lot more of filmmaking, lighting. Mostly, I've been talking about is camera gears and sort of the different things when people are looking for cameras. So, if filmmaking and video production is sort of your interest, definitely head over to James Jackson Films and check out the content I have over there.
And when we say you're a professional, we're not talking about a full-time 100% YouTuber. You actually do video outside of YouTube, is that correct?
That's correct. I own a video production company. We mainly do corporate videos and commercials, but also I've done all different types of aspects of filmmaking, including wedding. I do wedding videos, music videos, shot a short film as well. So I just love the art of filmmaking so much, and I'm glad that I have a career where I can do something that I love. So. I just like having and also now I have a YouTube channel where basically I can, help the next, people that want to get in or other people that are of my peers. So it's just a great way to just talk about something you love. So enjoy it.
Well, thank you. It's good to have you back. And also joining us again, returning from last week, we have Conrad Barrington. And Conrad has an awful lot of experience when it comes to corporate sales within the camera industry, but he's also got a lot of experience as a photojournalist. Conrad, have I left anything out?
And I shoot insects and flowers.
With a camera, I assume?
Yes, no video. I'm a pure stills photographer. I did some corporate video up until COVID hit and all of that dried up. So running around in gardens shooting insects now mainly.
When I picked up the 100mm, which is that one there, the f2.8, I tell you, I had to pretty well forget everything I learned with video, and I just focused on doing stills. With the exception of that B-roll, literally roll of bees, I've been shooting stills with it. So, Conrad, it's very good to have you back this evening.
Thank you.
And joining us for the first time, we have Sir John Drummond. And John.
Sir John. I've been knighted.
We're knights of the round table.
I am British, but I don't think I'm at that level where I can make it official. But yeah, let's run with it. John, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. You also have a YouTube channel, correct?
That is true. It's under my own name, John Drummond. Basically, I'm the outlier here in the fact that I'm an amateur photographer. I'm a hobbyist. I'm retired from 39 years in the public sector, and I got serious about photography, which has been a long time hobby. I got serious about it maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and focusing is Conrad earlier talked about birds and flowers. That was something that I shot a lot and still do. But over the last couple of years, I've gotten more into landscape. And then last year, I started a channel. I retired a few years ago, and this was kind of like a creative outlet for me. I've always been kind of an artsy person, even working for the federal government and in the United States. And now I had a chance to share my journey as I grow as a photographer, and video itself is actually pretty much of a new venture for me. And I'm learning about that pretty much with every shoot. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. And, and that's pretty much my goal, is to really try to have fun with it and help other people to have fun with their photography and their video.
Well, it's really great to have you here, so thank you very much. And for you watching at home, you're going to find that a lot of times I'm not making eye contact with you, and that's not because I'm trying to be rude. It's because I've got my control center here, and I'm watching the comments coming through. So while we do have an agenda to cover this week's news, this is going to be an engaging conversation. I'm going to keep an eye on the comments, so are my guests, and we're going to bring your comments and questions into the discussion. And then, of course, once we've gotten through all the news, we'll leave it completely open to your questions, whatever they might be, and we'll do our best to answer them. Now, I understand there are some of you that are a little bit impatient and want your try that again, question answered right away. Well, then go ahead and submit a super chat, and those always get prioritized. Those aren't my rules. Those are the rules of YouTube. All right, so guys, let's go ahead and take a look at our first news story. It's about how well certain camera companies or the camera industry is doing in general. So here we have BCN Rankings. Now, this is done by a company that looks at about 40% of Japanese retailers. So it's a small sample size, but as far as sample sizes go, 40% isn't that small. It's a decent size, but it is just looking at the Japanese market. And sometimes I get asked these questions. Does this information contradict previous data points? And not really. You got to remember, where does the data come from and what story are they trying to tell? You can have the same data point and draw different conclusions. But what we're seeing clearly, and let's take a look at these images here, we can clearly see that mirrorless is continuing its dominance. DSLRs, it's not going to make a comeback. This is not going to be Rocky IV. Mirrorless is taking over. It's currently right around 70% of the market share. And if we go to the next slide, what is pretty evident here is, well, how well Sony is performing in that mirrorless space, and they're just running away with it. Sony's performing very, very well. I believe that Sony E-mount represents about 20% of market share. Then you've got Tamron at 14.2, Canon very close at 13.3, which is quite a considerable feat, considering Canon wasn't even mirrorless on the full frame until very late in 2018. And of course, we have OMD, that's OM Digital, formerly Olympus. I feel like I'm talking about Prince here, at 12.5%. I don't know what it is with me. I just can't get the words out today. So I'm always a little curious when I see these stats, and I like looking at them, but I wouldn't try to overly read into them. So one very clear thing is mirrorless is continuing to dominate, and really that shouldn't be a surprise. And that Sony is number one in mirrorless also shouldn't be a surprise, because, well, Sony was one of the first ones to come out with a mirrorless camera, and they were so early that it was largely panned, and people are going like, what's Sony doing in this field? They don't know anything. Well, Sony has gone ahead and proven that they do know what they're doing and are doing quite well. So as I'm going to open this one up, Conrad, what do you think of these numbers, and what do you think of these market share reports in general?
I think the Japanese tend to be very loyal to Japanese brands, so you're going to find Japanese brands are very well represented there. When Samsung came to the camera market, the Japanese retailers really didn't buy into it, and Samsung had a very rough time entering the camera market there, as they did in North America. Tamron is, I was surprised to see Tamron doing so well there, where Tamron has such a weak presence in Canada compared to Sigma. But it does go to reflect the huge investment that Sigma has made in lens technology and marketing properly in Canada, and also supporting the Canadian market. The Tamron distribution didn't have the support, and for the longest time, Tamron lenses were actually cheaper to buy from Amazon in the United States than import them across the border. So It was nice to see Tamron up there, but Sony is continuing to march forward. I don't see anything to stop Sony just completely breaking through whatever hills are in front of it. It's just going to roll right over them.
Conrad, I'm really curious here. And you know what? I'll probably get slammed. I got slammed in the last video for being tough on Canon, and I should just give back my gear. This person, I don't think they understand how markets work. And once you buy something, companies generally don't want to take it back. And of course, there's depreciation. But do you think it's possible that Sony might be able to become the king of the market within the next 5 to 10 years?
To be honest, we had a Sony rep come around when I worked at Henry's about a decade ago, and he said Sony's going to become one of the big three. And at the time, we laughed.
Yeah, yeah.
And we look at ourselves now. We're like, he was so right. Sony came out with a plan. Canon also has a plan.
Yeah.
They took a long time to come out with the right sensors. They lagged on DSLR sensors for the longest time because Sony low light technology was just so blowing Canon out of the water for the longest time. But Canon developed the right mount. They've got lens technology that is absolutely excellent. They've got an exciting lineup. I think Canon is here to stay. It's going to be a 2-horse race between Sony and Canon.
That's a very good point, Conrad. For the amateur photographer in the room, John, no, I never asked. What do you shoot? You shoot with Canon, do you?
I shoot Canon. I've been shooting Canon since going back to film days. It's not so much of a matter of well, I guess beginning was brand loyalty, but basically Canon right now kind of fits my needs. Once I had taken a break from film and then got into digital DSLRs in the last decade or so, Canon was a brand I was familiar with, and they made stuff that I liked, so I kind of went with them, and I've stayed with them since. I found an article that has this chart that you're showing here, and I had a little bit of a different take for it because the text was not that deep, but I got the feeling that this was more of a lens sales chart than a body sales chart. And in that case, Tamron being as prominent as it is doesn't surprise me much because I mean they've been making lenses for Sony E-mount for years, and Sony had opened up their mount in the beginning because they built up their mirrorless system body first as opposed to lens first. And they basically opened up their mount to third-party developers out of necessity because they didn't have that many lenses of their own. Whereas, Canon kind of went about things the other way. So it doesn't surprise me that Tamron is doing that well. In fact, I know they had the 28 to 75 to get really rave reviews over last year when it came out, and a couple of others, for the E-mount. So I'll be interested to see where they are in 5 years or so when. Since Nikon hasn't opened their mount, Canon hasn't opened up their mount, so Sigma and Tamron have to basically reverse engineer, lenses, especially for autofocus purposes. I would be interested to see where they are with that in 5 years, if these numbers stay true. But yeah, I do shoot Canon, and I really like Canon gear. But it doesn't surprise me that Tamron's doing well, and that Sony obviously is doing well because they, got a head start in terms of mirrorless, full frame mirrorless market generally.
Yeah, very, very well put. And good catch. That's right. This article, I had to go back I followed several sources right back to the source and then had to use Google Translate on it, which I had to be careful too. It was I'll talk about that because it's another news story. But yes, you're more or less talking about mirrorless lens sales. But, I can't remember where I heard this quote, but you date the bodies, but you marry the lenses. If you don't have a deep lens pool, then that's definitely a problem. James, I see you kind of smirking at that comment there. It was pretty lame, I know. It's
I've heard that before. It's a good one.
No, you marry the lens, you date the bodies. Yeah, no, it's a great understanding of it. I look at this sort of like at the moment, it looks very predictable. It looks like what we see at the market currently. And I think in a sort of way of who was it? Jesse Cumberledge made a comment about if Sony doesn't get an A7 IV out ASAP, that graph will look much different soon. I don't think the A7 IV specifically is going to be like the reason, but there's a lot of things that are happening right now, especially on the video side of things, that could really reshape. As John and Conrad have brought up, Canon has really came out swinging first with the glass, because Canon is primarily first a lens company.
Yeah.
So they still have some catching up to do, but the uniqueness of a lot of the lenses they're coming with, and now combining with the fact that there are other camera manufacturers, more specifically to the video side, one which we will get to later on in the stream, there's a lot of potential opportunities to even give unique things with that Canon can benefit from, compared to what Sony has been having. But Sony still has strong control of this market, because they know what they have an understanding of where mirrorless is going. So, but I do believe I'm with Conrad. This is a two. As much as it's like Nikon and all these other camera, this is really a two camera manufacturer race between Sony and Canon. Canon, like Sony's going to dominate for probably about another 2-3 years, but I think as Canon rolls out a lot of these RF lenses, we're starting to see more of third-party lenses from like Mikey, and there's a Rokinon. They're putting out RF lenses now. So, so it's going to be very interesting as more lenses are being developed for this mount system.
Yeah.
How I think this is going to dramatically change, and I think it's going to be a lot closer between Canon and Sony than what people realize with this stats, not just for lenses, but for cameras as well.
I think you're right. So what we're seeing with Canon is the conversion at this point. A lot of people still stuck with Canon, as we can see with 47.2 or 49.2% as of 2020. A lot of people didn't want to switch over from that inventory. They stayed with Canon. And then when the R5 and the R6 came out, a lot of those people that were holding off on their 5Ds, and even some of them with their 1Ds, just jumped over and refreshed and got the Canon R5 and got the R6. And so we started to see sales. Canon is starting to pull back on that market share. So Canon does have still almost half the market share, and they're going to start converting people over. But still, they're rather limited. We've only got really two R system bodies, the R5 and the R6. The RP and the EOS R are a little bit long in the tooth. They're not aging well. They weren't even that competitive for Sony when they first came out. Although, that being said, they were still incredible stills cameras. But what I want to do very quickly is, before I go into the next topic, I do want to say a special thanks to Stop the FOMO. We were talking earlier today about some plans, and I was talking about what I'm going to do with the channel. He was going to try to join us today because there's one topic that I know you want to talk about, James. He wanted to stop by and talk about. But FOMO, Mr. FOMO, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. And he says, don't forget to like everyone. And yeah, you know what? If you just want to sit there in your chair, relax, and watch the show, by all means, enjoy a nice frosty beverage and relax. But if you can reach that mouse, go ahead and click like and subscribe, because it really does help this channel grow. Normally, believe it or not, this is a real fact. Most of my live streams, I generally lose one subscriber, have none, or gain one. It's just not a big driver on subscribers, but I don't really care. I really enjoy this format, and I think it provides a lot more value. Now, one of the questions we did have a little earlier, let me just zoom up for a little bit. It's from, if I can remember here, it's about, okay, here we go. Technology Advisor, when I talked about some new lenses, Sigma RF lenses, yeah, no, these are not for Sigma. It's for that other company that Canon's in battle with, Sony. So, but still, there's still some amazing lenses. But we do have some lenses we're going to talk about very shortly here that are for Canon. I'm going to jump to that really quickly. I just want to let you guys know what I'm doing tonight here. I got this sent to me, and I'm shooting with a new light here, and I've got a diffuser on it. So my lighting might look a little better. I do still have a ring light here, but I'm down one less light, and I kind of like this. It's kind of working nicely. I'm going to be doing a review on this a little bit later, but I want to use it a lot, see how it works, try it for 2 or 3 weeks. But for $200, it comes with a remote control, which is pretty incredible right here. And this is really handy if you're a one-person show, because you're trying to adjust the lighting, you want to adjust the color. $200. It's a pretty good deal. But That is not a plug. I'm not getting paid to do that. I'm just letting you guys know what I'm reviewing because I want to get right back to the news. RF lenses coming out very soon. We have two of them. One is the Canon RF 16mm, I believe it's a 2.8, and the RF 100 to 400mm. Now, I want you to just pay attention to some of these numbers here. You don't see an L there. It's not because I left it out, not because I didn't have enough room to put it in there. It's because these are not L series lenses. These are going to be affordable lenses. Both of them come with a pouch, and the RF 16mm comes with a hood. I almost feel like crying here. Ever since I've been covering rumored lenses for the R system, and I've got 2 pages of them, there's something like 36 of them at this point. There are 3 different variations on the 24mm. So many variations on the 50mm. Not a single mention of a 16mm. I've been saying this time and time again. I want a 16mm prime. 14 is too far. 18, not far enough. You see, I think 16 is at that point, and Conrad, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but 16 is at that point where you're not going to get that fisheye. I'm not going to have this huge nose and this really kind of warped head that you start to see as you start to go below 16mm. And at f2.8, depending on the price point, I might just buy it without even thinking about it. I shoot a lot in the deep wilderness of Canada, and I shoot a lot in the forest, and I'm not sure if f2.8 is going to be good enough for in there. Generally, I have to shoot between f1.2 and 1.8. Conrad, what do you think? What do you think of these lenses, these RF lenses?
I'm actually going to jump in on the 100 to 400, which is a lens close to my heart. The L came out in 1998, so this design is very old. It's been around for a long time and it's very well established. And a lot of the competitors at the time were going to 270, 250. There was always this race to push lenses longer, to go to 300, and to have a 100 to 400 with the fluorite element to give it the L status was unheard of. I don't think you need to have L on there. I think the spherical element design has come down to a much lower price point that your quality of manufacturing is making up for what you needed that fluorite element for to maintain contrast. So for digital sensors, I think the new 100 to 400 didn't need the L. A lot of purists will slam me for that, but you're going to have a lens now that's probably better than the 30-year-old design, just because of technology.
Where do you think it's gonna compare, or how do you think it's gonna compare to this guy here? This is the 800mm RF f11. Please excuse this. This is just the 2x extender. This is, I believe, $11.99 or $10.99 US. Or is it $8.99 US? I get confused with Canadian pricing sometimes. I love this. I've shot the moon. I've shot so many things with this. It's a ton of fun. So where do you think that 100 to 400 would fit in?
You're talking about portability versus retention of contrast. What you get with the 800 is a lens that has been purpose-built to give good results at one focal length. They've put everything into it. You're not going to have contrast loss. The moment you have so many elements and zoom cams working inside a lens, you are going to have light loss and stray focusing issues that will degrade image quality versus an 800. If you're a dedicated nature wildlife photographer and you have a subject that you just have to get as close as you can to, I would take the 800 any day. I would rather go with a prime lens any day over a short zoom. Any day.
But and this is why I like to keep my gear when I use it on the channel, so I can report back after a year. And I've had this for a year, and I can tell you, it is magical. And yes, I'm borrowing that from Apple. I love this lens. It turns me into a child just going outside, shooting the moon, shooting the planets. it is just a really, really exciting lens. And what I'll try to do is, turn it over to James and John, I'll try to find some B-roll that I can share with you. But it's a ton of fun. But autofocus is a little slow. What I find sometimes it's just better to use the manual focus. And you put that 2x extender on there. If you don't have enough light, you're going to see it. Now, if you're shooting in the summertime, not a problem. If you're shooting right before sunset, right after sunrise, it's going to be a little bit challenged. This thing needs a decent amount of light at f11, but especially so at f22. But surprisingly, shooting the moon, and let's see if I can bring this up here, bring up the photo app. I showed it last week, but this is just to kind of, let you guys know how excited I am by this lens. It's a cheap lens and it's affordable in a space where the R system isn't that cheap for everybody. So let's see here. Where do I have my share option? Let's try this here. This should work. Here we go. So cancel. No system audio. These are photos from the f2.8, the 100 millimeter. Anybody ever want to really get that close to a fly? Well, I was curious. It was a hot day. All right, let's go up to the moon. This was a farmer's market. I know what I need to do. Space, there we go. And I believe it's this one here. Is this the soft one? There's a bit of humidity. And let's see, it's not bad. You can get in some decent detail. But what I notice makes the most difference on this lens is if you're going to be shooting and there's some humidity, like you can see here, it was really humid that night. You can't see any texture at all. There's no texture at all. It's not a fault with the lens. It's when you're shooting that far, 256,000 kilometers or 256,000 miles. Here we go. This is the one that's really close. Look at this. Look at how close we can get in there. And then you start to see it fall apart a little bit. That's truly incredible. And the video I have of this, this is just absolutely staggering. The video is just truly incredible. You can see the detail, and it takes up the full screen. And there's one point where I'm doing a flyover of the moon, and I'll try to cue that up for you guys later. Very, very powerful lens. So I think this 100 to 400 is going to be amazing. But John, what do you think? Would either of these two lenses interest you?
Up until maybe a couple of weeks ago, I would say very much yes, but I've happened to have a couple of lenses that kind of fill the gaps of both of those lenses. But just talking in a vacuum, the one that would interest me the more of the two is maybe the 16. Now, I'd be interested to find out what Canon's idea of affordable is. Right now, they don't even make a 16 millimeter prime for EF mount, much less the RF. So I'd be interested to see which is what I'm interested to see what they do. And there are third party makers. There are third party makers that make a 14. For like about $7.99, I think was the price I saw for Samyang's or something like that. So 16 prime, I think would be pretty good, but I really want to see what the price
John,
point
let me
would
ask
be.
you this. So we know that the EF Nifty 50 is about $150 or less. The RF version is around $200.
Yeah, I think the Nifty 50 and EF is about $99, and the RF is $199.
Yes. Now the 24 millimeter that we currently have on the EF, what's the price on that one? Who can be the first to answer that? The price on the 24, approximately. What's the price on that one?
24, it's over $1,000, I'm sure.
24L or 24 like
the affordable
the STM?
one, the STM.
150.
So if we're thinking affordable, would it be? I don't know.
I would know because I had that lens.
Yeah. I don't know. I sense it's going to be somewhere between the 200 to 250 price point. For the STM.
Oh yeah, that's the pancake lens. That's what that is. Yeah, I think it's around there.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting. The 100 400. If I hadn't just bought the 100 to 500, I would definitely be interested in the 100 to 400. And I was very lucky to get that lens, which actually it's funny. You talked about how close you want to get to shoot a fly. Actually, in my case, it was about a foot, but not with that lens. It was with the 100 macro that I also just got a hold of. Yeah. And both of those lenses are in my last video for those who want to check it out. But they're both interesting. I know the EF 100 to 400 is a really great, really well regarded lens, especially the most recent version of it. Was it the Mark III? I guess it is.
Yeah.
So or two. I forget because they revise them so often. So I'm sure it's going to be a great lens.
Yeah, no, I no doubt that. Now, James, I'm not going to ask you this question because I know which story you really want to talk about. You're probably going to take up most of the talk time here. I don't know if I want to get to bed by at least one or two. But before I let you speak, I just want to take a look at a couple of comments here because they're germane to the current conversation. Tech Advisor asked, my question is, when do you think Sigma will develop the RF mount?
That was actually the one I was actually about to respond to actually as well.
Take it away then, James.
Yeah, the problem is that Sigma development right now, I believe the issue is that Canon is sort of keeping their RF technology, especially when it comes to the electronic bits, really close to the chest. So nobody really has it. The reason why companies like Rokinon and Mica are able to put out lenses is because they're basically manual, so they don't need to worry about the electronics. They just need to build the glass and build it for the RF mount. So that's really the thing that's sort of holding back a lot of third parties, that Canon's holding the electronic things information they would need really close to the chest. So once Canon gets that information out, then they'll be able to. But I think Canon right now is really just trying to get people into getting their lenses. Now, I'll just be quick. The 16mm is the one that interests me the most, especially for like traveling. Like it's a nice travel. I can even see it if you're trying to get into real estate, do real estate videos. Like the 16mm is like perfect for that.
Yeah, no, I think it's. I personally, I think I'm going to have to get it. All right, I was flipping around.
All you need now is that unlimited record on the R5, and then you got almost everything you want from Canon.
Well, you know what? I have it because when I'm out shooting my personal stuff, it's generally no more than a minute at most. And for YouTube, with the R5, I can't shoot without the Ninja. It's not like shooting with the Sony, with the A7S III. The Canon forces you, you've got to be a professional. You got to know a lot of stuff. You can't just go in manual and expect everything to look good. You need to make sure that the IRE is right. You need to make sure exposure. You got to fiddle with everything. You got to get it exactly right. And I find that doing that with the in-camera tools are not sufficient. The histograms just don't work. Seeing what the lightest and the brightest doesn't help me. I can look at that and, so here's this is reversed here. So you got the highs, so you got the highs on this side, you got lows on this side, and your middle gray could be it could be all the way down here. And you can't tell that unless you have a waveform hooked up. So that's why the histograms can be helpful and show you if you're peaking. It can't tell you if you've overexposed yourself.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've always said. The R5 will be perfect for three things: a waveform or false color, unlimited recording, and I forgot what the last one was.
Better exposure control. That's based do exposure control based on the focus point. At least have it as an option. Sony does it. How hard could it be? All right, now let's move on to something really new and exciting, guys. I see there's a lot of questions here, and I'll do my best to get to them. Well, I want to talk to you about this camera here, the Red V Raptor ST. Wow, what a name. I'm pretty sure that Red has gone out. They've hired some of the coolest teenagers. They said, look, I want you guys to come up with a name for this camera because the V Raptor ST, it doesn't get any better than that. The only thing I think is a little bit lacking here, they had an opportunity and they just completely failed. They could have made this look like a Borg cube, but instead it looks like something, that's square. Nice though. But here's the really big thing about this camera. It can do 8K at 24, 25, 30, 50, 60, 100, and 125 frames per second. That's just staggering. And in 2K, it can go up to 60 frames per second. Sorry, 600 frames per second. But 17 stops of dynamic range. 17 stops of dynamic range. That's astonishing. They would have had me with 8K 30 at 17 stops of dynamic range, and the video is 16-bit RAW. This is just an astonishing camera, but it is going to set you back a little bit. The Red Raptor, as you can see right here from different angles, you don't need to see my little ugly mug here, so I'll turn that off. But this camera is going to start at $24,500 US. And basically, you're probably not going to get out of the store for at least $30,000. But this is just, it's one of those cameras. I was talking with FOMO about this, and it's perfect to have a conversation with him for fear of missing out. to have this camera on my channel, wow, I would absolutely love to have this camera, but I think my wife, who's walking around now making a little bit of noise, would probably kill me if I spent $24,500 on a camera. Now, the good news is this is an RF mount, but you can adapt it for EF lenses. So we're going to go to...
By the way, that's $25,000 for the brain.
Yeah, just that square unit, the board cube.
Just for the brick. That's just for that. Now they have a starter kit that will go.
It's not $999. It's $24,500 unless you're talking about the lens earlier.
Yeah, but yes, no. The starter pack is $30,000.
Oh, sorry, I want to say thanks to Jesse, a longtime viewer. Jesse, I do very much appreciate the $5 super chat. And James says the Raptor at 25K or Blackmagic at 12K. Or sorry, the Blackmagic 12K at 6K. James, you've got a really good one there.
Yeah. So this may be controversial or may not. I'll take the Raptor at 25K.
Why?
Over the Blackmagic at 6K. And it has to do with form factor. For me, it's not just about the image. Like the big thing of the Raptor, obviously, is 8K 120 frames per second. But anybody, which I know. Your channel is about the ordinary filmmaker, which obviously $25,000 is a little bit high. So the thing I want to say is that with the reason why is because of the form factor, it's just the fact that it's a lot more simple and easier to get to. I like the fact that they have phase detection autofocus built into this camera compared to Blackmagic that doesn't have it. And Red Code Raw is terms of what you can do in terms of control is insane with Red Code Raw. Now, for anybody that may be dreaming about this camera, just keep in mind with Red cameras, if you want use the full width, you better shoot at the full resolution and be prepared to shoot at the full resolution, meaning you better be prepared for shoot at 8K.
Okay, what does this mean?
Means if you drop resolution, it drops. If you drop resolution, so every time you drop, so if you drop the 6K, it goes to Super 35 from the 8K format. You drop the 4K, it's like micro 4/3 crop, and then so in 2K, I think it's even less than Super 16 if I remember correctly.
Sorry, what I meant to say is, what is the impact on storage and your cost? Because I imagine storage costs at this level is going to be, and I know FOMO is going to be watching this later because he shoots a lot of his stuff in 8K so he can zoom in or punch in later.
Yeah, I do it too. It's on the R5, which I have over here. I shoot on 8K on that quite a bit. Yeah, it takes up a lot of storage space. Now, Red's compression is actually not that bad. They got different compression options. So they got an HQ, an MQ, and an LQ. And I can tell you, most people are probably going to who do get this camera are probably going to shoot in the LQ format. And I'll say you could probably get a decent amount of time, probably like 45, 50 minutes, which I know some people seems like it's insane, but when you're filming 8K, like when I shoot Canon RAW light, I'll be lucky to get 40, 50 minutes on a 512 gigabyte CF Express Type B card. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of data, but it's also a lot of information that you can have control over. But these cameras are really aimed for professional productions. Even though it's a small camera, you still need a lot of light with this camera. You're still going to need a crew with this type of camera. But it's very exciting. And I'm really excited, not just for the camera, but what this also means for the future of Canon. Because one of the other things Red announced was that they're producing an adapter for PL mounts that will have an electronic ND filter, which means, well, we don't know for sure if this will work, but Canon could possibly also benefit from this as well and get an electronic ND on, say, the R5, which would be awesome.
One thing I got to go back to is when we were talking about the cost and you know, when you shoot 8K, because I've done it, and you know what, I have a 2 terabytes Angelbird card, and even when I shoot 8K, I don't care, I don't worry about it. But you know, when I had a Corvette, I didn't complain when I went to the pump and had to put in that 94 octane fuel and said, "Wow, that's awfully expensive." You at this level, you got to understand your storage costs are going to be huge. But I understand that this is the ordinary filmmaker, but I don't know about you, James, but when I was a kid, I hung Ferraris and Lamborghinis on my wall, and it wasn't, I didn't think, can I afford these? And I think as the ordinary filmmaker or photographer, we're still keenly interested in this technology, just from a point of awe, or from a point of, where is this going next? Is it coming my direction? So one question I want to reach down to Conrad. And Conrad, we were talking last week how Blackmagic dropped the price of their 12K. It's no longer 12K or 11 something. It's now 6K, $6,000. And I was talking with FOMO earlier today, and he asked me what I thought, and I told him, based on what I told you guys last week, that I thought, if a company drops a price that quickly, it makes me wonder why. Is there something happened? Did they get the price wrong to begin with? Is there a lot of them sitting on the shelves? A year after it's out, you don't usually drop the price that much. And he said, well, I think they're in trouble. I don't think it's selling well. And what do you think, Conrad? What do you think is going on with the Blackmagic? And would you take the Blackmagic or the red V Raptor? I mean, the name alone. Oh, sorry, I put you on mute earlier when you were typing, so let me take you off mute. Sorry about that. Hold on. Now you're off mute.
There we go. All right. So lots of shenanigans going in the background in the camera industry with pricing, and it's a ball game where marketing often gets involved, and there are a few factors involved. I've seen Canon play the game extremely well against Nikon year after year after year in the corporate field, where Canon just before major events will bring tons of product into Canada and drop the price against Nikon. Nikon would just be dropping their jaw looking at the prices. So there's definitely a lot of strategy involved. I don't think you drop a camera by that much money because it's not selling. I think corporate types that are getting paid by the dollars they bring in are going to be very reluctant to undervalue a product just because they think it's not selling. If you're having a fire sale, there's a bigger problem. We'd have caught wind of that. I think there's probably something slightly more strategic here, where they could be playing for market share somewhere. It could also be that they reassessed and felt they had initially overpriced it, and once the R&D money had been recuperated, they said, okay, now let's just go and take the wind out of the sails of the competition, which is more what I think something like this is. It's like, you think there's something coming down the pipeline, there's an ebb in popularity in the whole segment, and you're now repricing yourself just to kind of like get the ball going on sales and people talking about your product again. A lot of people will be unhappy, but when you bought that product, you were happy to pay that price at the time. The fact that it is half the price 6 months later, that doesn't matter. You got your value out of it, so be happy.
All right, good point. John, what do you think?
Okay, well, as far as that price drop, I mean, I remember reading about that. Obviously, these are both cameras that, as a a real newbie in the video world, is that something that I'm going to be jumping into anytime soon, if not in this lifetime. But that was my initial thought, also, that maybe the camera just isn't selling when they drop the price that much. But beyond that, I really don't have anything I would call an educated opinion on the subject, to be honest with you.
That's why I love having Conrad here, because Conrad's got decades of experience, and I was pretty sure, FOMO was pretty sure that, there might be, the cheese might be going bad, so to speak, and, I appreciate your feedback on that, Conrad.
Yeah, if you can get someone to buy into your ecosystem as well, that retaining a customer, gaining a customer, and denying someone else a customer is worth more than, losing a bit of R&D development on the price of the product.
Oh, do you know who that reminds me of? You're old enough that you probably will remember this, but that was a strategy of Commodore. Jack.
Okay. Yeah.
To him, business was war. He'd say it all the time. He would undercut everybody, even lose money on a product to put another company out of business. He was one of the first. We hear a lot about Apple and their supply chain logistics, but it was really Commodore that really started having stuff produced in Asia to drop costs. And I think he was selling a Commodore 64 at the time for for like next to nothing. It was around $200 US for a full functioning home computer. So I do get that strategy. Thanks for that. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our next topic here. This one here is kind of interesting. I'm going to ask John to comment on it first because, well, this just came out on Canon Rumors before. No, that's the wrong one. No, take that out. Go away. Here we go. I hit the wrong thing. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, guys. Just before we started this live stream, Canon Rumors put out some information. John, you want to tell us about this one since you discovered it?
Yeah, so you're talking about the rumor that Canon is going to be launching a new RF body in January. This is like a CR2, which makes it a fairly strong source, although even though it's not a lot of details behind it. And the interesting thing in that story is that the source supposedly told Canon Rumors that it's a body that's going to basically tick off a lot of Canon fanboys, to paraphrase it. And I'm kind of wondering what that means because, as you know, for the Canon, there have been a lot of rumors about what are going to be the next bodies out. There's a lot of things that people have been asking for. They've been looking for like a more affordable body to as a jump-in point for people to get into the RF ecosystem. Something that would replace the RP and maybe a lower price point. There's been talking about a cinematic version or more cinema-centric version of the R5, the R5C that wouldn't overheat and and would have active cooling. There's been talk about something to replace the R, as kind of somewhere of a mid gap between the RP or whatever the RP successor is and the R6. And this sounds like it's going to be maybe like none of the above, and I don't know what that none of the above is going to wind up being, at this point.
Yeah.
There was even the rumors, of course, that went on for a long time about a high megapixel body that would have somewhere between like 60 to 100 megabytes and megapixels, I should say.
100 megapixels, over 100 megapixels, and it's been going on for 1.75 years now.
Exactly, and that's kind of going nowhere. And it looks like it's not going to be that. That may be overkill, in my opinion, anyway. But nobody really knows. I don't know where any of these rumors are. APS-C. That's the other thing that's been talked about.
Yes.
is bringing an APS-C body for people who are like maybe in the M system or as something kind of a bridge between the M system and the RP system. And that would also be more affordable and less expensive than any of the full frame bodies. And that seems to be, the rumors are all over the place at this point, and it sounds like whatever's going to come out, if that is a real rumor, it's going to be something that's it's going to make some people happy and a lot of people have them scratching their heads. So at this point, your guess is as good as mine is what it's going to wind up being.
Yeah, my guess, and then I'll turn it over to James, but my guess is, well, first of all, CR2 means it's validated from known sources. But this is one of those cases where I look at the wording and I go like, okay, so you're somewhere within Canon's supply chain or you're working at Canon and using the term fanboy. And usually the term fanboy is used as a derogatory term. So I saw that and I kind of went like, really? If they come out with a camera and it's going to have certain capabilities,
I think that's really talking about more
segment.
like Yeah, I think that's more like what with the reaction of the YouTube community, YouTube creator community, as opposed to the actual user community, and of course, those could be two very different things.
Yeah. So. Well, James, what do you think of that rumor? I'm still waiting for the R5C, which NAB 2021 might be possible. What do you think of this? EOS R camera that might be happening in January. I mean, you could say that about almost, you could say that about October too, and get that one right.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught me sort of chuckling. I was chuckling at Robert M's comment where he's saying everyone is always mad at Canon and every camera release, which is very true. Maybe who knows? Maybe what's going to upset the fanboys is that this is going to be like the R3 and fail the wind blowing test from Garrett. But no,
I saw that. That was funny.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's just they're going to annoy. To me, I don't know if I want to. To me, there's not really anything to go out. It's just that we know a camera's going to come out. What it sounds like to me is just that it's not going to have the latest and greatest specs, and then that's the thing. There's something that's going to be seen as a setback.
Look, there's the biggest hole in Canon's lineup of its stills hybrid cameras is essentially where the RP and the R stand right now. There isn't really that
Entry level.
affordable entry level that has the
Yeah.
modern capabilities. And I think if they refresh or come out with an entry level that's designed to replace the RP, sure, it's not going to have the same features as the R6 and the R5, but that can be expected. Have it compete adequately well against the Sony. Try to even beat Sony a few areas, and you're going to have a winner because there's very few companies that offer a sub $1,000 full frame camera out there.
Yeah. So, but that's the extent for me with this, is that it just sounds like it's going to have not so latest greatest specs, but that also to me means this is probably going to be somewhere on the entry point. I'm sort of with you. It's probably going to be the affordable entry level camera, but it's not going to wow anybody.
But it'll be
Which
a
is-
top seller.
Yeah, it'll be a top. Like, look at the M50 Mark II.
Yeah.
It's a camera that really isn't any much different than the M50, but that camera sold like crazy because it's a camera that it's easy for beginners to get in, understand. It's something light, travel the pack to. Even though the lens options of that particular mount is not the best, but it still was one of the top selling cameras. So to me, this is really not that, as something that has made me talk so much. It's just not much to say, ironically enough.
All right, so getting a corporate perspective on this, Conrad, now it's been my understanding that some of the more affordable cameras like the 90D or the A6100, these tend to be the top selling cameras, and it's that make companies more money. Or am I wrong? Which are the cameras that generally make more money for these companies? Or is it none and it's the lenses?
Entry-level cameras by far make the most money. We would have sold the Nikon D70 at 100 to 1 versus Nikon's top-of-the-line Pro cameras. And digital, the DSLR Rebels, the Rebel series line, sells at 1,000 to 1 against the NE5D series. So those cameras on the production line churn out the money for those cameras that really pay for the higher end stuff. If you think about how many pro photographers there are running, let's say the 5D, for example, there were a lot of pro cameras walking around with it. We would have a lot of people walking into a camera store, dentists and doctors saying, I want to buy a 5D because it's the best camera on the market. And you're like, you don't need a Ferrari. It's like, no, I don't need it. I want it. And then they'd be back the next week asking you how it worked, right?
Yeah.
So it's the entry-level stuff that feeds the mouths by a long shot. And what you want to get is a price point for entry-level for people who are on a budget, for students, for beginner photographers. Once your brand is imprinted on someone, it takes a long time to get people to drop a brand. There's a lot of brand loyalty. I look at Nikon now, and I'm extremely disappointed with where they are as a company and with where they are technically in mirrorless. But I've grown with the system. I know what I've got, and what I've got is serving my purpose so well that there's no purpose for me to jump ship. I hold on waiting for better things to happen. If I had to jump ship now, looking at what Fuji does is probably where I'd go with their ethos on usability, ergonomics, and color science. But yeah, the low end stuff feeds the high end stuff in development by a long shot.
Yeah, I remember Tony Northrup was showing this on his channel, and he did a search on what was it, Amazon.com, I believe it was, and all the top selling cameras, even at the time when people said the DSLR was dead, were DSLRs from Canon. It was the 70 or the 80D, the 90D, the Rebel series, the T8i, the T7i, because they have an awful lot in them. And you know what, Conrad, I wish I could say Canon, look, is there anything I can do, give you some money, that you can give me back some of those options you put in those cameras, where I can say, okay, I'm going to go to night mode, portrait mode. I always shoot in, I shouldn't say always, I mostly shoot in manual, especially when I'm doing video. And in photos, not as much. Quite often I'll choose aperture priority, or I love FV mode where I can say, okay, you know what, for here I want to set the shutter. I want to set it to 1/1000th because I'm doing birds. I want to set the f-stop to, let's say, about f8. And I'm going to let the ISO move around. And then maybe, okay, you know what, I'm always going to be shooting in the sun, so let me lock down the ISO as well. I want to make sure all these shots are the same. And I love that. But there are times when, especially when I'm on vacation, I don't want to think. I just want to move it to one of those dummy modes. And I know, I get it, it's a professional camera. But, you know, doesn't everybody want help every now and then? And I kind of miss those. And I know what you're saying, because it has taken me a year to get to where I am. And I finally come to the conclusion that if I had bought an A7S III, the learning curve would have been a whole lot less steep. The R5 doesn't look on you kindly. If you don't know how to use exposure, if you don't know how to do manual, if you don't understand ISO, and if you don't understand the triangle, don't understand how these things work together, the R5 is going to look at you and go like, yeah, man, learn it. I'm not going to help you. And it's those other cameras that you're talking about. It's so well said that they really, really do make shooting a breeze. And, you know, like the T8i. I did a video on the T8i versus the 90D, and I thought, you know, these are both very, very good cameras. So much value in them. So yeah, really good comment.
What I'd just like to add on to that. One of the big things that pros will look for is when I'm looking at a camera, I'm looking at the buttons on the outside. I'm not looking at the menus. I don't have time in the middle of a shoot to start scrolling through menus trying to find a setting that I want to change. I want access to that in 1 or 2 clicks. I want to be able to have something programmed onto a program wheel, or I don't even want to take my eye away from the viewfinder to change modes. And Nikon offered that for the longest time. So entry-level cameras do a lot because, yep, they've just had to absorb a lot of the functionality into automatic menus. For 99% of photo taking, that's okay.
Oh, I do love buttons. I love them a lot. Although that EOS R slider, not so much. All right, now let's go on to a topic that we'll probably only spend a few seconds on, but I still want to cover it because it's interesting. Back in the day when I just did a lot of these standalone videos, this one might get 300 views, but we have a new sensor, and this one is, as I said at the beginning, is capable of 2,000 frames per second, and it's made by Gpixel. It's called the GS Print or G Sprint 4510, and it's a micro four thirds sensor. Micro four thirds sensor, 10 megapixels. 4.5 micrometer charge global shutter, so it's got a global shutter that's really good. It's using the 65 nanometer process, and it's capable of 4K and 1080. And here's where it talks about the speed. You are going to get 1928 frames per second in 8-bit, and it drops down to 500 frames per second in 12-bit. I would love to be able to see a camera with 240 frames per second. I really do love 120. It gives you that super smooth slow motion. But even on the R5 with a very beefy processor, you start to see the softness in that video. And I'm sure Canon could give us 240 frames per second, but the softness would get to a point where you're no longer giving what professionals want. It would just look a little bit cheap, but the way we're moving with these processors, and just look and see what we're having with the M1 and the performance level there. But yeah, anyhow, Conrad, I want to go back to you. What do you think about sensors like this? Where do you think they're going to be utilized?
I think this is going to be specialty YouTube channels, people that want to do the super slow-mo and can utilize this sort of thing. It's a very limited market. Gigapixel's tried things in the past and they've never quite found the niche they expected. They're good at marketing, but I don't think they've got the logistics to deliver something that's going to become a mass platform. It'll be a niche product.
Thank you. James, I want to take a look at this comment that Nomad said. And I hate general statements because they're always wrong, because the problem with general statements is half the truth. Pros want full manual control. Enthusiasts want convenience. Well, I'm a pro and I want convenience. In fact, anybody who's in business wants efficiency. And efficiency is being able to deliver your capabilities quickly and succinctly. And if convenience means you can do it quicker and still deliver the same results, you're going to jump to that convenience. So I would disagree with that statement. Pros don't want full manual. In fact, I know several people like Stop the FOMO. He's a professional as well. I'm the same thing. I believe in autofocus. I will not use manual if I'm shooting videos like this, because have you seen this R5 right now get the video wrong, whether I move up like this? Sorry, get the focus wrong? No, I rarely see it miss. And I'm wearing glasses. Sony and Canon, they really hit you with that autofocus. It's so reliable that, you know, I leave it on all the time, and if it does get it wrong once, everybody kind of does, it happens. So I get it. Manual works. If I'm doing product shots of the Mineo microphone, for example, I'm going to switch it over to manual. I'm going to zoom in, I'm going to focus, then I'm going to zoom in, focus again, and focus again, so I've got everything perfect. I'm making sure it's sharp at the right points. But I will argue and say that a pro, and James, you're a different kind of pro, so you might disagree with me, but I would say a pro knows when to use manual and when not to. James?
Yes. So that is true. A pro knows where. I do agree with that. I agree and I disagree with him. I agree that pros want full manual control for certain things. Autofocus is one of them. Because I will say especially that because the one thing as good as autofocus has become, it still does, you still can't direct it like you can direct a first AC. That you say, hey, at this point where you have all these people around pulling in, all right, I want you to pull in, and then I want you to go to that one. Especially some of the Canons where it will jump to find the face. It'll find whatever it can define as a face. Sony does this too, where it looks to find a face, but it may not be the face you want. So there's some things like that where I'm telling a story and I'm using the focus to tell a story. I want that manual control. Having said all that, convenience, time is money.
Yeah.
The more time I have to spend, Conrad can probably agree with me. The more time I'm spending trying to figure something out, it's time that I am losing, that either I'm losing just in terms of my time, but also maybe my client is losing for me to figure out. The more time I can save is the more time I can do either for projects or times that I can save for my clients. So to me, time is money, and I'll take convenience, which is why I film on a C70. I could get something like I've had Blackmagic cameras, and they are great. They deliver great image quality, but they are such a pain in the butt in terms of convenience. Mm-hmm. And I, as beautiful as the image is, I don't have to carry nearly as much stuff with a C70. I can. It keeps me energized. It keeps me going during a long shoot day where I could just grab the camera, go shoot, film, go handheld, grab sticks, go on the gimbal, without carrying everything, decommissioning the rig of the camera. So having the convenience of just having a camera that can be part of the team that you have in terms of filmmaking, that to me is a very viable thing, which is why I say the C70 is arguably the best camera for under $10,000 in terms of video features. Now to this little topic right here. Yes, it's cool. It can do 2,000 frames per second. But that's cool. But what's good to me? It's like, what's good? It's all about good slow-mo. It's not just because you could do it doesn't mean you can do it well. Yes. I've seen too many cameras. I mean, look at the RX line from Sony. They could do 1,000 frames per second. Have you seen how it looks? 1,000 frames per second looked on those cameras on 1-inch sensor. They look terrible. So yeah, you could do it, but it's a Micro Four Thirds camera, which means it needs a lot of light, more so than anything. And it's even then when you put a lot of light on it, it's still probably going to be very noisy. So and the fact that it's 8-bit, to get that 2,000 frames, you got to shoot 8-bit.
Here's what
To
I'm
me, I think
wondering.
it's more marketing fluff than
Is it?
anything.
I could think of a niche market. I can think it certainly in scientific. So, for example, you're shooting insects, you're shooting stuff in the lab, and you're going to have a ton of light on this stuff, and you're going to be able to get frames per second. So you want to see what happens when something breaks, when something hatches, when something explodes. And I'm wondering, but again, it's micro four thirds, so I'm wondering what the use is. But obviously, they're throwing everything at high speed, so it might be something like that.
Yeah, I was
But
going to
Yeah,
say that.
the only
I was going to. I'm sorry. I just wanted to echo a similar point that it sounds more like something that has more scientific and industrial applications than, say, creative, as Simon just said. Like, studying, say, the aerodynamics of a hornet's wing as it's taking off or something like that. If you're or that kind of extreme slow motion scientific things is something that's going to be that a sense like this I think is going to be more applicable for as opposed to somebody just shooting a wedding or even sports, unless you want to see the deformation of a baseball as it strikes a bat, which could be great b-roll for ESPN or something. But beyond that, I think it's going to have limited application. I think the article that I was looking at might have been Gigapixel, I'm not sure, also talked about the cost of the sensor, which nobody's mentioned it yet, but it is going to be probably out of the ballpark for most people outside of the corporate world. So I mean, this is an interesting thing to talk about and look at, but how much of that tech is going to drill down to more ordinary filmmakers like us, is another story.
I mean, and also being more corporate, I can tell you right now, more corporate are going to look at something like a Phantom camera, which are designed specifically for high frame rates. Like,
right.
That's like if I'm like something like Discovery or National Geographic that's in that corporate world, I'm looking to a Phantom because I know that camera ecosystem is built that can deliver the details that I need at that high frame rates. So it's just it's interesting, but I'm like, I don't know where it's going to go with it.
I do want to go back to that one topic again because I've seen a few comments talking about professional, and I think I agree with you, James. But, especially when it comes to a lot of scenarios, if you're doing run and gun, if you're doing corporate stuff, you're doing weddings, you want to switch between subjects. Well, having that manual control really matters, and I love shooting manual video. I did that with the mic, 50mm, and I had a ton of fun shooting it. But as I said, there's many different markets, and think of it in terms of use cases. For example, if you do a YouTube channel like I do, you're doing studio work. I would never let the ISO stay on auto. I'd set the ISO, it could be 250, 340. I'll set the f-stop, I'll lock that down, I'll lock down the shutter. But when I'm out doing run and gun, quite often I let the autofocus just go, and I keep an eye on things, and I've rarely ever been burned. But again, it depends on your use case. And all I'm trying to say is generalized statements such as pros don't use auto modes at all. Well, a couple of years ago, pros didn't use color, pros didn't use digital. And what we see is when a certain technology or capability improves our results, and a result is something to do with scope that it gives you something that you didn't have before, or it affects costs. It makes something cheaper. You can produce more of it or earn more money, or you can do something in a shorter amount of time. And like, for example, the M1 MacBook Air, which I'm working on right now, I'm staggered by this thing. It's 1/4 the price of the iMac Pro that I used to have, and it's faster. I mean, so don't get upset when I say, autofocuses should be used by everybody, including pros. No, I'm saying it depends on your scenario, but pros do use auto features. It depends on the scenario. And a pro will look at a situation and say, what do I want to do? How do I want to set up the camera? All right, let's move on to... Let's move on to the next title here. Or sorry, title. It says title here, but let's move on to our next story. I love sometimes to do nothing but drone on, and if you have the new DJI Mavic Pro 3, you'll be able to drone on with the best of them. Now, I know what you're thinking. What do you mean, Mavic 3? There's no Mavic 3 out there. Well, what we do know, here's what we do know, guys. We do know that there's going to be an announcement scheduled for September the 8th at 9 a.m., and that is in Eastern Time. But what we've been able to find out through various leaks, and we've got pictures of it that have been leaked apparently, and again, these are leaks and rumors, so I'd have a glass of salt water with it. But What it sounds like is that the Mavic Pro is going to be announced on September the 8th. It's going to have dual Hasselblad cameras. It's going to have a new collision avoidance system, and what they're going to be doing is moving the sensors to the corners. 40 minutes of flight time. That is pretty significant. 40 minutes of flight time. I get about, I think it's upper 20s with the Mavic Pro that I have. 60 millimeter adapted lens, 5.7K. But this is where I kind of wonder, well, 1 terabyte of storage. It'll support 1 terabyte of storage because, the one I have, you have as much storage as you put in terms of SD cards. And I'm wondering if what this means is that it's going to support up to 1 terabyte of storage rather than come with 1 terabyte of storage. Based on the previous ones, that one doesn't make sense. I certainly would not want it to come sealed with storage, and that way if the storage failed, then I'm up the creek.
The Mavic 2 Pros do have internal storage, so it's probably talking about that.
Yeah, but what do they use internal storage for, and how much internal storage does it have?
I think it's like, I don't remember the amount of the storage, but it's there. It's like if for some reason you forgot your micro SD card, you still have some place to store it so you can still offload it. So all of a sudden you can't fly a drone and record because you forgot the micro SD.
All right. John, we got to get you to smile a bit more. Somebody said you're not smiling. There we go. There's a smile that broke 1,000 hearts.
Yeah, it's funny. I was laughing actually earlier because Robert M. Put up there, said he's no used to not seeing me in front of the camera, it's usually behind it though.
Yeah, well, and
yeah, obviously I'm the amateur in the room, so a lot of what you're talking about is like, over my pay scale, so to speak. I mean, my thought in terms like amateur versus professional is, how do you define? Strictly speaking, of course, professional is someone who makes their money off the camera, but I consider myself a very serious amateur, and so going back to the issue of manual versus auto. I mean, depends on what I'm shooting and how much time I have to do it. Given my druthers, and if I have all day, I'll use manual. But if I've got like if I'm shooting landscapes, for instance, if I'm shooting, birds, obviously I'm going to be using auto most everything because I can't tell a bird to just stop mid flap and pose for me for a second. So it all depends on what you're doing and what your use case is and how much time you have to execute what you're doing.
Anybody here used a drone?
Well, I live in New York City, so they're not legal here. I would love to.
I have the Mavic 2 Pro, and I love that drone. It's hard to find places. It's usually always whenever I leave the States. That's actually when I ever start flying it. because it's like it's not all the places I go to. They don't have as difficult laws, but so I've been waiting eagerly for the newest Mavic Pro line. So this does definitely intrigue me. I'm very curious about the new obstacle avoidance, because that's one of the things about the Mavic 2 Pro, because it's definitely on the longer end of the tooth. I don't know if I said that phrase right, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's not has the most like recent up to date obstacle avoidances like their newest Mavics, like the Mavic Air or the other Mavics that they've released. So I'm very curious to see what they could do. I'm glad they're going back with the Hasselblad sensor. It's, to me, that's the best sensor they have put out with these drones. I just wish it was a little bit bigger. I wish it was micro four thirds instead of 1 inch, but it's still bigger than most of their drones, so I'll take what I can get.
I bought the first one and I loved it, but since I bought it, legislation has changed significantly. Now I'm licensed under Transport Canada and the FAA, but what really bothered me is that if I go to a state or provincial park, I can't use it. And there's some of the best places to take a drone. So that's a little sad. I went to Niagara Falls and I found that there's this one place in Goat Island that you can fly it, but that's the only place that's right by the falls. And I'm surprised because there's an awful lot of helicopter traffic in that area. What I was able to do is I was able to go like 10 miles north or somewhere on the Canadian side and finally go up, but I was up high enough that I could shoot down and it looked like I was close, but it's yeah, you're right. Like Toronto, no, I can't fly around there. Paris, knock yourself out. So I don't see myself getting a new one because while I've got my license and all this, there are very few places to fly them. But that being said, I do, obviously it's a primarily an aerial camera, and I'll still use it like if I'm in the backyard or if we're at a park, even if I just take it up 20 feet. I'm not even above the tree line at that point, and it gives me a different view of everything that's going on, and I think you're less likely to have issues there. But yeah, really sad. I love drones. Anybody else used one?
Well, I haven't
Nick,
used one, but I was going to just dovetail on what you just said in terms of the parks, at least in the United States. That they're banned in the national parks as far as station, and the reason because of that is that national park system was set aside to preserve the sanctity of nature and preserve species and things like that. So I think there's legitimate environmental reasons for that. Of course, on the other hand, some parks, obviously like the Grand Canyon and Niagara, as you said, they have helicopter and tours, things like that. But those, of course, are. And then there's a lot of actually debate about either whether that's appropriate because of the pollution that they cause. I mean, if you go to the Grand Canyon, half the time it's just full of smog.
John,
of
I
exhaust
have trouble with
from the
that logic
helicopters,
too, because over our national parks we have 747, 737, 767s, Airbus A320s, Airbus 380s.
Yeah.
You can hear them. Them. And I don't know. I understand that you should have a license because you know what, you can bring down a plane with these things, and I get that. I really do. But I'm wondering sometimes if we went a little too far.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned just a few weeks ago, some tourist from Texas, I think, flew a drone into the side of the World Trade Center building because they didn't know that drones were not allowed in New York. So,
yeah. Nick Cannon made a comment like in Ireland, you have to pass a government test to use a drone or it will be taken off. You will have a fine and imprisonment possibility, which seems a bit more on the extreme. To me, it's just it's a lot to do with more with control. Either control of just protect in terms of planes, but also they get to control what footages can be used in these state-run areas.
There is another option, and Conrad, you're probably familiar with this. John, you're close enough to Canada that you probably are familiar with this too. But there was a very famous gentleman in Canada called Super Dave, and he was on Letterman several times. And he used to strap himself to rocket slingshots and shoot himself in the air. And he seemed to get enough airtime that you could get some really good shots with these modern cameras having IBIS, and I think that would work quite well.
I remember Super Dave, yes.
Super Dave Osborne.
Exactly, Super Dave Osborne. Yep, I remember him.
I can echo caution on using drones in nature reserves. Just from June, we have an article where someone crashed a drone while breeding terns were nesting, and all the terns on the beach abandoned their eggs. So it just takes one irresponsible person to mess it up for everyone else, unfortunately.
Exactly.
So we have the rules in nature reserves for a reason, and they're the last breeding grounds for so many animals. So I really, as photographers, we have to go into a place and not disturb what we photograph. And that rule, we all live by that rule and know that rule, but there are people who won't abide by that, and the rules are there for them.
You see, it's always that guy that is the reason we have that law. Oh. Yeah. I get it. So let's move off that topic because I'm going to cry again because I want to get a new drone, but I just can't justify it because what am I going to do with it? So we got some new cameras this week, not just the Red. We got some Fujis. Fuji's dropped us a pair of cameras. Let's take a look at them right now. First, we're going to talk about the Fujifilm X-T30 II. It's going to have the X-Trans CMOS 4 sensor, 4K maximum 30 frames per second, but 1080 up to 240 frames per second. Low light to -7 EV. It's going to have 10-bit 422 external, but it will do F-Log internal. And of course, with a lot of Fujis, you get those film simulation modes. The 18, or you get 18 in this case. The next camera we're going to talk about has 19, and being released or having been announced, it also comes along with two new lenses that you might consider getting for your Fuji. The 23mm f1.4, nice and wide there, and of course a 33mm f1.4. Although I believe now the X-T30 is an APS-C camera, yes, because it's Fuji. They don't do full frames, and it's definitely not a medium format. So that 23 gives you the equivalent of something like 30 something, I believe. So not my 16 millimeter. And price $899, and I will have the links down below. So again, if you guys are interested in buying any of this stuff, use my affiliate links, and it does give 2% back to the channel. The Fujifilm X-T30. Anybody here who loves the Fuji platform? Actually, Conrad, what do you think of this? Yeah, I knew it.
If Nikon had put their name on this would be Nikon. I'd have been all over it. This is exactly this is at the point where you enter into the camera market, where you're fed up with your cell phone. You know you want something better, and something like this falls into your hands, and you just fall in love with photography. It's that kind of camera. Tactile, ergonomically beautiful. Fuji does everything right. Everything right. Their cameras are sexy. It's the only way to describe their cameras.
You know what, Conrad? I wanted to buy the X-T3 just because it looked gorgeous. And I'm not talking about the all black one. I'm talking about the one with the silver highlights on the top and then the black body. Oh, it took me back to when cameras looked like cameras. And I wish I could show you, I feel like wanting to show you my R5, but it's filming me right now. And the 70D is in the other room. Look, most of us have children and they're gorgeous to us, right? But every now and then, not so much. And I like Canon. In fact, I like all the camera companies. But when it comes to beauty, well, it's not like it fell down the ugly tree and hit every branch on the bunch. But when you look next to Fuji and you just see the design in their cameras, I just love that retro look. You can tell that somebody worked hard there to sculpt the camera, to think, how do I want this to look? And I agree, the Fujis are just gorgeous looking cameras, some of the best out there. And I almost bought one, but what held me back is, again, you date the bodies and you marry the lenses, and the XE4 hadn't come out and the XE3 didn't have IBIS. And that meant there were very few lenses that fit what I was looking for. So I kind of went away from the X-T3, but I really wanted a Fuji because they just looked gorgeous. They really do.
I'm thinking of that meme picture of like the guy with his girlfriend who's turning around, who sees the attractive girl, and the girlfriend is like, "What the heck?"
Yeah,
that's Canon for you, and the other girl is Fuji.
If you ever go to an event and you speak to the Fuji guys, they love photography. Anyone working a Fuji desk at a show, they are technical people first and marketing people second. Everyone I speak to at Fuji knows their stuff, is into photography, and the first thing they'll tell you is what they shot in the weekend. So it's not like the corporate you get from Canon and Sony. These people love their cameras, and it just comes through with them.
You know what, Conrad, one of the things, sorry, James, I'll go right to you, but I want to talk to that emotion and passion. One of the things I wanted to do more with this channel is bring out passion a bit more. And what I love about this panel is, look, having each of you here spending a Friday evening with me is better than watching Star Wars A New Hope, which I was just watching. And I love that movie. I was 7 when I saw it in the theaters. New. And, I love passion. Look, here, I've got some perfect B-roll for you at a time like this. I'm going to share with you some B-roll as I talk about... losing my words here because I'm trying to do multiple things at once. To me, this is the video. This is all shot with the 800mm f11. I wish I could get into more passion pieces with this channel, because I love just being able to go outside and shoot, not have to worry about producing content for the channel, not having to worry about, did I get exposure right? Just to go out there, like I did with my son this morning, early before work. He picked up the 70D, I picked up the R5, and we shot together. This is Convergence, December the 21st. And you know what? Oh, it was... I love that. I think it's certainly, once you've had people in your life that are very important to you perish and die, you've had people born in your life, no matter how tough you are, you become far more susceptible to emotions. And there's nothing like taking a camera and a lens, getting out there into the environment and seeing what you can produce, even though you can see better pictures than this off NASA's site. But I did this. I did this myself. I got those rings of Jupiter. I showed those. I got close up to the moon, and I didn't have to spend $250 million on a probe. You know, and that's the passion. Oh, so this is now my son. So let's go away from here because I don't have permission to show his stuff. Although I sneak it in every now and then. But yeah, that to me is, and what you were seeing there actually is the main reason I got the R5 is not for the channel, but I produce basically a continuous film. It goes from December to November, and it's a montage of our life. And we capture it, and it's really amazing because I separate it by months, so you get to see people grow older or grow up. And one of the reasons I chose Ordinary Filmmaker is I don't just make videos, I make films. I edit it together, I cut it together, and what you would have heard behind there timed is to 2001 Space Odyssey. I don't know how to enunciate the name. It's actually open source. I could have played it, but everything is done right. So you've got it balanced, you've got it color graded, you've got it shot right, tons of detail, or I blurred the background or I haven't. And each scene has its own rules. And then the sound effects, doing the audio right, and then providing a score. And because it's for personal use, I can actually use expensive titles. I purchase the songs on Apple iTunes, and I can pick up, if I like this, and I use the Top Gear and the Grand Tour because they have some of the best soundtracks, and I'll go, oh yeah, I'll use that one. I'll put it in there. I'll edit it and I'll change it. And when you watch this, not only do you have the emotion of what you're watching, but you have the sound so you can hear it. And if the audio is at the right level, you can feel it. And that's what a film does. That's what a movie does. Mm-hmm. But I'm ordinary. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for our family. But this channel, I do for us because it's a chance to explore. So sorry, I've gone off on a tangent. How many... And we actually went up in viewers. So it worked for us. I thought I might have lost everybody. But James... I cut you off earlier. I just wanted to throw something in there, but yeah, take the reins, my friend.
No, yeah, I played with the Fuji X-T30 for a little bit before the X-T4 was announced. I will say this: there is something artistic about the designs of Fuji cameras, especially with the analog dials. And for me, it's not necessarily for me because again, I like something a little bit more in a cinematic box, but I could totally see a bunch of people who, as we talk about one of the big selling points is those entry level cameras, and at that price point, with what this feature has, I think this is Fuji. I mean, Fuji's had a couple winners, but this is a serious winner that they have for what you get for about $900.
Pretty awesome.
And you get, and for those people that just love to create, it gives them a chance to really just sort of get it, even though it's not a film camera. It's not like when I mean film camera, Conrad, you know what I'm talking about. But there's still an element of that traditional film camera in there. So I'm really excited and happy for people coming up for photography that may want to look at this camera. And I'm telling you, if you are coming up, this is definitely a camera I would definitely put on my list of potentially getting.
And a big sorry, I just want to interrupt. Thank you so much to Peter Gregg for a super chat. And Peter says, Fuji, what's Fuji? Now I know what it's like trying to read weirdly typed comments when you're live. Fuji is an awesome photographic tool. And yeah, so thank you again, Peter, and everybody else for super chats tonight. Appreciate that. So sorry, James, continue.
No. Yeah, no. That's pretty much it. I'm thinking this is I think this is a great camera. This is going to do really well for the lower end market. I think this is going to be a big winner for Fuji.
And here's something I want to bring up once again. You'll see a lot of videos on this, and you look at Apple's keynotes and the iPhone. I have it right here. Gotta be careful how I open it so you don't see my credit cards and everything. But I've got the iPhone. It's a work phone. I didn't buy it myself. I wouldn't have a cell phone if work didn't require me to have one. It's truly incredible the photos it can take. But when it comes to video, and when you've got that super small sensor, you cannot get the same quality that you can with a purpose-built camera. Now, if you're shooting at noon, or if you're shooting from between 10 o'clock in the morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when you've got a lot of light, yes, the iPhone's going to deliver very well. But whenever you get into the sunset hours or the low light hours, it won't do it. And I've produced a couple of videos in the last couple of weeks, one on the R5, where I did the gimbal review, and a video before that, and you can see the difference. The low light, the noise is terrible when it comes to a sensor like this. But this Fuji with an APS-C, yeah, it's not full frame. Sure, it's not medium format, but still, APS-C is large enough that it captures enough light that it can perform well in low light, especially if you've got a cheap lens like a nifty 50. So, really wonderful camera. Now, I'm going to move on to another Fuji, and I think we're going to lose a little bit of that emotion. So let's go ahead and take a look at this other Fuji camera, the Fuji GFX50S II. Few too many names there. They need to talk to the people at Red to get better names, like the Velociraptor 2 would be really cool. This camera is the GFX100. Well, it's got the body of the GFX100 with the old 51.4 megapixel sensor. It does have a new processor though, so that is good. It's got the X4 Trans processor, 6.5 stops of IBIS. It's smaller, it's lighter. Sensor readout 130 to 250 FPS, and it's got one more film simulation mode. And they've also released the 35 to 70 GF f4.5 to 5.6 WR. I'm not excited by this one. And I want to go over to somebody, again, Conrad, who has a lot of knowledge of cameras. Conrad, what do you think of the 50, the GFX50S?
Fuji's doing something very smart here, bringing down the price point to make this more affordable. It's now challenging against a lot of similar mirrorless cameras, high-quality mirrorless cameras at a price point, which is very smart. Anyone doing archival work or anyone that is doing stock photography is absolutely going to be looking seriously at this camera. Where you are archiving or shooting stock and people are paying you by the megapixel, or you want to preserve detail, this is gold. So it's going to have a very interesting point. I don't even know if this thing shoots video. I don't think video on this camera is important in any way. This is an archive monster.
Yeah, and it does have video, although it's capped out at 1080. It's rather soft and it has a lot of moire, and it's not really designed for video. What they're saying is, look, if you need video for whatever reason, look, we're going to give you the ability to do video, but it's not really high detailed. The one thing, though, Conrad, let me ask you about this, though, because this is the only thing I think is a real kind of, there's a couple of things people perceive as downers. One is that it has contrast detect autofocus, and I don't think that's a downer in this camera. Sure, if they went with a modern autofocus system with a modern sensor, then yes, you could get more frames per second. But I just said it. It's got a rather old sensor. Do you think that's going to hinder its sales?
No, the contrast detect and the old sensor does not matter. You're going to be shooting this in the studio. You want higher megapixel. You want to be able to pixel peep with this. Fuji had the color science right the first time. You don't have to question them on where the color science went.
But contrast the dynamic range isn't that great on this sensor.
Not going to worry about that as well. If I'm a wedding photographer or a running gunner, I need dynamic range. If I'm shooting in a studio and I've got controlled everything, and I'm doing archival work, or I'm copying, or I'm going for detail, I'm as responsible for the lighting. It goes back to where we were saying we want give me convenience, give me death earlier, where you want to you don't have to think about every single shot. I don't want to think about every single shot, but I do want consistent results every single time. I will press every single button on the camera if I have to get the same results from the previous shoot. And when you're shooting at this level with this kind of megapixels, and when you're managing files at this level, you are shooting seriously. This is not a casual camera where you're going to be going from one environment to the next within the next 20 minutes, and you need all the dynamic range under the sun.
It does
It's a
produce,
specialized tool.
yeah, it does produce really, really detailed, incredible stills. So I certainly agree there. But these are some of the things that we're hearing when people talk about the camera. They go, "Oh, well, I don't know. The dynamic range isn't there. It's using an old sensor. Why can't they use a new one?" But still, you're getting a medium format camera for the same price as the R5. But let me ask you, well, actually, one more question.
Yeah.
In terms of other high megapixel camera, like what about the Sony A7R4? What would you go with? Which of those two cameras would you think is would you default to if you're in the wedding event business?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately no longer ever going to shoot another wedding as long as I live. I'm never again.
Amen. Amen.
I've been there. No, I would rather starve to death in a gutter.
I just pictured that.
The horror stories. I look at this as a studio camera. This is a pure studio camera. You wouldn't be shooting a wedding with this unless you had total control over every single event in the wedding, from every single lighting aspect, and this was going to be your main camera. Sony's more portable. This lends itself to a very controlled shooting scenario. So wedding photographers that want to shoot really high quality weddings, buy the Sony. If you're going to shoot in the studio all day and you have total control of your lighting, then look at a Fuji medium format sensor.
Fair enough. James,
Yeah,
I know you're mostly a
add,
video. Oh, sorry, John. Why don't you take it away with us?
Yeah, I
and then
just
I'll go
wanted
to
to make a
James.
couple of observations. Yeah, definitely the 50 and the 50S and the 100S. I mean, as Conrad said, I mean, Fuji, I should say, did a really smart thing, basically just jumping from APS-C, skipping full frame altogether, and going into medium format. Left and basically carved out a really good niche for themselves because they got some very competitive high megapixel medium format cameras that are at a much lower price point than say a Hasselblad or something like that. And these are really stills monsters. There are a couple of landscape photographers that I follow, and the images that they get, using like the Fuji 50 and the Fuji 100 are just amazing. And you talk about, and that's a genre where you really want to be able to capture as much detail as possible and be able to print as big prints as possible, and that's something that you can do with this camera and the 100 megapixel version. They're not video cameras. They're not designed to be video cameras. They're stills monsters, and they're really good. They're really good at that.
Thank you very much, James. Final thoughts on the GFX50S?
I think the other two gentlemen pretty much said it all. This isn't really for video, so I don't really have much to say. But yeah, pretty much exactly what the gentleman said. Fuji has really carved themselves out in both APS-C and medium format. So nothing else.
All right. Well, that covers off all the major news stories. Now we are going to end this live stream at 10 o'clock, which is in 22 minutes. But what I would like to do now for everybody watching is let's go ahead and open this up to your questions. And so if you've got a question, you can direct it at any one of us here in the Ordinary Filmmaker News Panelists, and we'll take your questions. But this is the kind of part that I enjoy the most because we can completely go off the agenda and we can talk about what's going on in the camera world and what we're doing. I just completely lost what I wanted to say now. Can you believe that? It's like I had a mind. It's all gone. I feel like the free guy right now.
Yeah, Peter. I see a comment from Peter Gregg that the volume. I guess there may be an issue with the volume being too loud
Corrected
because of
already.
the app.
Yeah, you guys are shouting too much. You got to stop
Nope.
shouting. No, I've corrected
Sorry.
it. The one thing I like about
Sorry
the
about that.
software that I'm using is I do have sound levels, so I control my microphone, the movie microphone, sound effects, and of course the interview. And you guys are considered the interview, so I brought that down a little bit so it's not like you're shouting in their ears.
Yeah, it may be an issue with my headset because for myself, I can't really hear myself. So I really can't. I can hear you, but I really can't hear myself. So if I'm speaking a little loudly, I apologize. It certainly wasn't intentional. I literally can't hear myself with this headset on the way this thing is set up.
Well, like I said, I'm from Ontario. You're from New York. We generally all talk loud. I've learned not to talk as loud. So that's something I taught myself in the last 10 years, not to be as loud. I want to tell you what I'm planning for tomorrow. Give you a little bit of my a view into my world. I've been telling my son for like a long time now that because he's taking his iPad, he wants to go to the trail, he wants to shoot with the iPad, take photos. And I said, son, you want to use a real camera. And this morning was the first day he picked up and said, Daddy, I want to go out and shoot with this. So I put on autofocus, I put it on one of the auto modes, took the lens cap off and said, here you go. And he went out and started shooting with it. And he actually got some pretty good shots. So he was shooting with a nifty 50. But that's a very good lens. And where we went, there was very little light. This was just after sunrise, and he took some really good shots. And so what I think I want to do tomorrow, because I did it this morning, I took my R5 out there, and I shot video. But I forgot that I had left it. I was doing the setup for this particular event, and you know what I did? I used it on on the memory mode, the custom mode for this, which doesn't have 4K HQ, and it doesn't have C-Lock. And so I had to come back and delete it all. So I'm going to try and go out again tomorrow, and hopefully I can reproduce that. I hate that. See, it's early in the morning. I didn't want it to be on some of those modes. I wanted to be on full manual, and I couldn't save it.
Uh-huh.
Just the quality wasn't there.
Real Raymond got a question, and he's like, when will Polaroid and Kodak make surprise announcements that will shake up the market?
What year is that question from?
What decade is that question from?
I believe in 1880, Kodak made a huge announcement. Raymond, I didn't realize you had such a sense of humor. That's a really good one. But we got another super chat. Thank you so much, Jesse. Much appreciated. And Jesse's got a question for you, James. Oh, you can't see it, of course. That's right. James, does shooting with a Super 35 sensor make you wish you had purchased a full-frame cinema camera? Oh, that's a good one. I love that question. James, do you want some dramatic music? Let me see if I got some dramatic music.
I was contemplating.
Sorry, that was not the dramatic music I was looking for.
Amazing. That was Hans Zimmer level dramatic music. Honestly, to be perfectly honest with you, no, I don't. I don't regret it, even though I know not only there's full frame is definitely a direction cinema is heading. For a lot of camera companies, also just the film production, a lot of is moving into a full frame platform, and there's a lot of really interesting things coming from a lens selection and from the cinema side. That lens, in terms of lenses that are coming from like big name cameras that have been doing Super 35 for so long, but I don't because to me, especially with the C70, if in terms of field of view, I can just throw on the Canon the Canon Speed Booster, and I got a full frame field of view. In fact, it's a little bit larger than full frame. So in terms of the field of view, I got that. And I actually like the depth of field of Super 35. If I really need, for me personally, because I do shoot, now I'm shooting with autofocus, like right now, just like you, I'm shooting with autofocus, as you can see. But when I'm doing projects, I like control, so I like to use manual focus, and I personally like to make. I don't like to have it like where just a little millimeter off, and I'm no, my subject is out of his eye is out of focus. So I like a little bit of depth. So for me, I can't think of any other benefits with a full frame. Lights with the C70, light's not really a big deal because the shadow details that dynamic range has, it's insane. It's so clean in the shadows. So to me, I guess it's just the camera I'm with. I don't there's not that much benefit from full frame that makes me regret it. But I do see that that's the direction that cinema is going, and when the time is right, if my business takes me that way, then sure. But no client has come to me like, we need a full frame. We're looking for a full frame project. To them, it's like, does the project look good? And Super 35 or full frame, it does.
And Jesse, one of the things you might want to look into, I wish I could remember I think it's Digital Film School. They actually look at, wow, that was instant recall. That was amazing. One of the things they do is they look at a scene framed exactly the same way with the equivalent lens between, and when I say equivalent, I mean they frame it so it looks like everything's set up the same, but the depth of field, it looks and feels different. And what all this boils down to is not, should you go with one or the other? What is the look and feel that you're going for? What is the emotion you're trying to tell? The difference between all these lenses here is they tell different stories. Somebody once asked me, okay, so this one's 24, this one's 10, and this one's 100. That's only like, it's 80 millimeters. How can that make a difference? And if we just look at it from a very sort of numerical standpoint, we kind of lose the emotion behind it. But the difference between each of these lenses is the way you tell a story. And I think it's No Film School, if I remember correctly, but they really have a really detailed look at the two. Not saying one is better than the other, but how one will give you a slightly different look than the other. So really take a look at that. Conrad, there's a question from Digital Film Reviews I'd love you to take a look at. It's the one that says, why are people sleeping on these new Panasonic S lenses? And he lists off the 24, 35, 50, 85. All the same size with the same filter thread and with linear focus control. Perfect quasi-cinema lenses for the S5.
Are these all L mount? These the new L mount or that?
Let me see if I can do this right. How was that? Did I nail it?
No.
Sorry.
You need more reverb.
Okay, let me go back to this again. Sorry. There we go.
How many users have bought into the L mount to a level that's going to sustain this kind of thing?
I would say it's approximately 5% worldwide, and that's all of Panasonic cameras.
And going down at that.
Panasonic was one of the few companies that didn't get caught in the Honeywell phase detection lawsuit. So they're still stuck with contrast detection. And, they can design all these lovely lenses all they want, but if people aren't buying them, I don't get excited about them. I took a long, hard look at Panasonic when they were micro four thirds, and the sensor let them down a lot. And I don't think they had the market penetration and market share to migrate for those customers from micro four thirds. The people at that point, when they realized they had to change their lenses, looked at Sony at that point, which was stronger in so many departments, and a lot of those customers just went to Sony.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question here, this is about the Sony Alpha 1, and I even find myself trying to recall this. RP Epstein asks, Sony Alpha 1, 8K RAW external like the Canon R5. I don't believe the A1 is exactly like the R5 in its video specifications. I do know that the Sony Alpha 1, and please guys correct me if I'm wrong here, it shoots 8K video, it does it internally, and it can also output 16-bit RAW video. to an external recorder via HDMI, but I don't recall if that 16-bit RAW video is 8K or not.
So it is. So okay, it's 8K. Yeah, it's not 8K. It's 4K. The output, 16-bit output,
what
is
I thought.
4K, not 8K. But also, yes, it can output 16-bit, but unfortunately, there's no recorder in the world right now that can capture 16-bit. It just condenses it down back to 12-bit, even all the animals. So
annoying.
right now, there's no way to capture that 16-bit. It's just 12-bit at the moment.
And here's something else I found really annoying too. I bought the MacBook Air, which I'm using for the entire channel at this point. The MacBook Air, the low end one, and so I thought, yay, I can start using HEIF. So I set up my Canon to record in photos and stills, RAW plus HEIF, 10-bit, yay! And I really notice a huge difference, especially if you're shooting in a high contrast scene with the blue sky, a little tiny bit of blue sky coming through the trees. Instead of it being white with JPEG, it becomes blue with HEIF. I bring it into Pixel Maker Pro, I go to output it, and it looks like crap, it looks overexposed. Well, apparently, because of the way Apple handles the APIs, they automatically down it to like 10-bit or something. So you lose that HEIF detail, which I hate it when companies do that. So hopefully they fix that. Other question here. Let's see here. Cleaning the chat. Yeah, okay. So I don't see any questions.
Yeah, I see a lot of comments.
Okay, so Peter's got a question. I see a what? What camera are you on, James? Oh, he's asking James. So I'm not. Oh, James. You, James. James, what camera are you using? It's so hard to nail the purples and blues. It's looking great. You did an awesome job. I told you, James. I wasn't just buttering you up. Didn't I say that?
No. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And thank you, Peter. I do appreciate it. I think I already answered. I answered it already in chat, but yes, it's the Canon EOS C70 that I'm using right now. But yeah, this is one of the things I love about this camera. It's just how well it handles all this different types of information.
Okay, sorry. Time to digital film reviews. I'm going to part the clouds and tell you that Canon now, are you ready for this? Offers dual recording at the same time. Firmware update 1.4. Yeah, hold on. Let's see if we got...
Yeah, that was in response to a comment from Digital Film Reviews, who was complaining about Canon not offering redundant recording. And that was the response to it. Actually, now with the firmware updates, both those bodies do that.
Yes, and here's the thing. I've been doing it. I've got a 2 terabyte Angelbird CF Express card, and in the SD card slot, I've just got a V30, but it's a 1 terabyte. So now I just enable it. Even recording 4K HQ records to both card slots. And here's the thing people forget. 4K HQ is still 4K. It doesn't double the amount of pixels. It just takes that 8K and down samples on camera. You got more detailed information. You don't have more information. But the ability to record to both card slots, I'm always pulling that CF Express card out when I want to bring it into the computer. But if for whatever reason that card is corrupt or the file is corrupt, I've got another copy on the SD card that I'll take the time to load it. But knowing the fact that I'm able to record to both card slot is it's like oatmeal in the morning. You know what? It just warms you up. It makes you feel good. Anybody eat oatmeal anymore, or am I the only one?
I hate oatmeal.
I give oatmeal to my daughter.
Good boy. That's good. My wife makes oatmeal, and it's like soup. I'm like, that's not oatmeal.
Yeah.
That's horrible. I hope she's not hearing me. She brought me this tea, by the way. You know what? I know how to make it up to her. She
Good save right there.
Yeah, that's right.
In case she sees it again, hey, she probably maybe this is good save, man.
Let me show you what my wife made today. You guys have got to see this. It'll knock your socks off. Don't ask again. Don't install audio. Cancel. So yes, this is the moon. Let's go away from that. Let's take a look at, I guess, library. I don't use this very much. Let's see. Trying to find one. I'm not going to zoom into any one. This was me doing it. As you can tell, I'm not a photographer. I just fail at images. I have to think about it before I start shooting it. But she made this cake. Really detailed. Everything. The decorations, everything she made herself. So really, really stunning.
Robert says he loves oatmeal.
Robert, which Robert?
Robert M.
Robert M.
Oh, Robert. Yeah, Robert's long time watcher. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Did Moving Matt? I think Moving Matt gave me a super chat too. I can't remember because we went
did.
through things. Moving Matt, thank you so much for the super chat. Much appreciated. That's not the one I should have used. I should have used this one here. So thank you very much, Moving Matt. I appreciate your support. We're going to have you on the channel at some point. It's just, this is still new to me, and I try to invite enough people for the show, and sometimes I invite too many because we're all busy and we don't see the answers. And then by the time we get to Friday, hey, I'm available, and I got too many people.
Yeah, I want to ask Movie Matt's question. John, how did you get so cool? Were you born that way, or is it some books I can read, or is there some book I can read?
I can tell you how to build bikes, but as far as cool, I don't know about all that. It's I'm just being me. That's all, man. Yeah. I thank my crazy family. When we get together, we just bust each other's chops, and it's like it's almost we were at it. We had a family luncheon a couple of months ago, and we just had the whole place laughing because all the stuff we were saying to each other. But no, I'm just trying to be me. I don't know about. I thank you, Matt, for the compliment. I hope one day we can both be on air together. That would be really cool.
And you know what I would love to do is I'd love to get both you, Matt, and John on the channel together because you're both very similar in your journey on your channels. And I think that would be really good because here's the thing is when you're starting out, you have different questions than when you're at my stage or when you're at, Jordan Drake's stage. And so I would like to bring both you on. Maybe we do that as a separate thing outside of this and we just talk about that. And I think that would be a lot of fun. But this is a perfect opportunity. I don't know why I didn't say this at the beginning of the show. Maybe because, I'm a little bit silly.
Can I ask? Can I answer Roberts? He had to send a question to me. He was asking, "Are you using the focal reducer right now?" The answer is no. I'm just using the RF 24-105 f4 lens, which for the RF. So, by the way, if you are considering getting any camera on the R mount line, the 24-105 is one of the best ones you can start off. It's right at that point where it's not crazy expensive like some of the other LO series lenses, but it's just up there to give you that professionalism, and it's to me the best starter kit, which is crazy enough to call it a starter kit, but it's an amazing glass.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that lens it's amazing. I mean, it is an L lens, but it's a reasonable L lens, and up to that point, it's literally probably the sharpest lens I had bought up to that point, including all of my EF glass before that. So it's an amazing lens. So if you had the choice between getting the f4L and the other one that's the 4.5 to 7.1 or something like that, get the f4L. You won't regret it.
Thank you for that. Guys, we're going to wrap it up. We got about 3 minutes left. What I want to say a few things first, though, is I've got another live stream this Sunday, and I've got these guys are up and coming. They're relatively new. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but here on this channel at 4:30 in the afternoon Eastern Daylight Time, I've got Dan Watson and Jordan Drake here on The Ordinary Filmmaker, and we're going to talk. It's going to be a human interest piece. We're going to talk about each of these gentlemen, how they got started in the industry, their lessons learned, their outlook on the industry, technology that has changed how they do work, and some of the biggest inventions and innovations that are affecting the industry. And I think that's going to be an awful lot of fun. I've worked with Jordan Drake a little bit in the past, and when I say worked with, he helped me when I was giving away a Weeble S a couple of months ago. He officiated, and I'm glad he did because the person who won was a person who won the previous contest, and having somebody independent officiated really, really helped. So it's good to have Jordan back on the channel and also Dan Watson. So it's very exciting for me. I feel like I'm punching a little bit above my weight here with 23,000 subscribers, and these guys are in the hundreds of thousands of subscribers. So I will be taking a lot of questions and comments, and also if you want to feed me questions and comments before then that I can prepare and ask them, I'd be more than happy to do that. But thank you so much for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker. I really love having you guys here. This is a great way to spend the evening. Unlike what another gentleman said, giving up our Friday, we weren't giving up our Fridays. We were spending it with friends and having great conversations. So I think I can speak for everybody. We're more than happy to be here, and this is an awful lot of fun for us. So thank you from my heart. Any last words for anybody else?
Well, just thank you, from me for asking me to be on. It's been an honor. It's been a lot of fun. I think we've had a great chat, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and please visit James Jackson Films and John Drummond. Subscribe and like. It really helps their channels grow. And I'm going to sort of end it there. But one other thing, too, a friend of mine, Peter Gregg, he's been dropping a few comments here. He's going to go live on his channel, and he takes a rather exuberant and interesting and silly and fun, forget the worries of the world live stream. So you guys might want to check that out. But that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in to watch The Ordinary Filmmaker. I'm trying to make eye contact while I hit the right buttons on the screen. So waving to everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Very much appreciated.
Thank you guys for joining.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
We'll see you again soon, guys.
All right.